No, I think electric cars are very much in America's future, and I think much sooner than autonomous driving.
Warren Buffett is one of the most successful business investors all over the world and the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. His investment decisions are followed religiously by investors. It is an old habit of his to not invest in tech companies. He has been investing in Chinese EV makers. Why is Warren Buffett investing in Chinese EV makers and not in American EV makers? Why not Lucid? Welcome back to another video on New Vehicle Media, your go-to channel for all updates on CCIV. Feel free to subscribe so we can always update you with the latest news. Smash the like button if you enjoy this video and drop your comments down below. At the end of our videos, we feature the best comments. In today's video, we're going to compare the Chinese to the US EV market. We will take a deeper dive into the market trends and the vehicle infrastructure. More importantly, we will feature the influence of the governments. Warren Buffett, the American business magnate, turned $232 million into $5.6 billion in less than 13 years by investing in the EV market. How did that happen? Make sure to stay and find out. All our videos are provided with timestamps in the description, so feel free to check those out and navigate through the video at your own pace. Chinese market attractions. Several factors make investing in a Chinese EV maker sound like a good idea. The number of vehicles sold all over the world is 84 million cars. Out of these, 24 million vehicles are sold in China alone. If we see the sales trends, vehicle sales are declining in the US and European countries while they're on the rise in China. Car makers have started to begin producing electric vehicles in their lineups lately. Still, there are very few pure players among them all over the world. Pure players are car makers that are investing a major portion of their money in the EV sector development. A substantial number of these pure players belong to China alone. Europe has only two companies that can be called pure players, Renault and Volkswagen. The number of pure players is only 3 to 4 in the US. These are Tesla, Rivian, Nikola, and Lucid. Out of these, only Lucid and Tesla have been practical EV makers while being pure players. Lucid is aiming at the top-tier luxury EV buyers, something that is very crucial for the EV market in order to compete with legacy luxury car makers. Many other companies are coming, but their contribution is not much substance. On the other hand, the number of pure players is above 180, and many of those are well-established companies and groups. These include Auto, BYD, NIO, SAIC, Aways, and NIO. These are very obvious yet critical reasons why Warren Buffett did not invest in American EV makers and rather chose to invest in Chinese EV makers. American market trends. The people of America have always welcomed gas guzzlers with huge engines. V8-powered cars were favorites in the 60s and still are. As the demand for internal combustion engines is high in America, there are fewer growth prospects for EV makers. Most of the market share is controlled by well-known companies like Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. These companies have just recently started work on their EV lineup and haven't stopped producing ICE vehicles. Only a few car makers are purely into the EV business, like Tesla, Lucid, Rivian, and a few more startups. The market share of vehicles stays the same, and these EV makers have to compete with the ICE vehicles as well. This limits the growth prospects of American EV makers. Public response to electric vehicles has also not been quite encouraging. A lot of education and regulation is needed to make people buy electric vehicles in several parts of the United States. The drastic difference in the market trends of the American market and Chinese market must have been studied and analyzed by Warren Buffett and his team to a very great extent. Just taking a glance at them reveals which company is better for investing in EV makers. EV makers such as Lucid are playing a key role in the education and inspiration of the masses to shift them towards EV makers. This can be seen in the form of the Lucid Studios. Chinese government role and US government role. In China, the government and EV makers are operating in harmony. There are many regulations made by the government that encourage EV manufacturing and sales. One reason behind this is that many Chinese car makers have a huge stake in them, which is owned by the Chinese government. A huge majority of these car makers have now turned into pure players of the EV industry. This leads to no or very little friction being formed between the EV makers and the government. The public also feels much facilitated and tends to buy electric vehicles in China due to this reason as well. Things are quite different in the United States. There is a huge demand for internal combustion engine vehicles in America. This demand encourages the car markets to keep on making more ICE vehicles like they always have. The government wishes to do the opposite and limit the use of ICE vehicles. Its purpose is to reduce emissions and stay aligned with environmental sustainability trends being followed all over the world. This creates a huge amount of friction between the government and car makers. As Warren Buffett critically studies external factors such as government policies and consumer demand to see what will be the effect on these companies, it does seem like a better idea to invest in Chinese EV makers where the friction between government and EV makers is much less and they work harmoniously. This has also led to successful policies in China, such as the 5-year automotive plan that plans to get 50% of all vehicles to be NEV, new energy vehicles, by the year 2025. Warren Buffett is to benefit hugely from such policies as he has huge stakes in Chinese EV makers that will be contributing to the 50% vehicle sales in the year 2025. Chinese electric vehicle infrastructure. China is leading by example when it comes to the introduction and implementation of EV infrastructure on the city level. There are more charging stations in China than in any other country in the world. On top of that, many cities have also been given electric buses and taxis in replacement of the internal combustion engine ones. The city of Shenzhen is a prime example. It has a population of almost 12 million people who have converted to electric vehicles. Not only in their vehicles, but there are 22,000 electric taxis and 16,000 electric buses all over the city. There is a network of over 1,800 chargers across the city. Such infrastructure applications are not being seen anywhere else in the world, not only in the United States. Most Chinese cities will be looking like Shenzhen in the coming years. It seems like the right decision to make for Warren Buffett to invest in EV makers that will be selling their cars to such cities. Having an adequate charging station network is the backbone of the EV industry. No country is setting up more charging stations than China. People would never be interested in owning an EV in such a place where there is a lack of charging stations. This makes internal combustion engine vehicles seem like a better option due to wider fuel replenishment options as compared to electric vehicles. EV makers such as Lucid are focusing on shared charging platforms rather than exclusive chargers. This will lead to the widespread availability of charging stations to owners of several EV brands. Warren Buffett's decision is highly supported by the presence of extensive charging infrastructure in Chinese cities. Success of BYD. Warren Buffett's company Berkshire Hathaway invested in a Chinese automaker named BYD. This was done 13 years ago when the CEO of BYD entered the automotive industry after being the world's largest rechargeable phone battery manufacturer. His name was Wang Chuanfu and was said to be very good at solving technical problems. Berkshire Hathaway saw the potential in Chuanfu and invested $232 million in 2008 for a 10% stake in the company. Initially, Warren Buffett wanted to get 20% of the company, but was refused by Chuanfu as he did not want to sell his company. As the EV industry boomed in China, so did the success of BYD. The company sold more than 130,000 electric vehicles in the year 2020. Its biggest rivals included only one EV maker from outside China, Tesla. The rest were also Chinese EV makers such as Wuling and NIO. All this has increased the $232 million investment by Berkshire Hathaway to $1.6 billion in just 10 years. The boom in electric vehicles seen in the last 2 years has increased the value of the 8.3% share to $5.9 billion at the end of 2020. BYD gave him more than 20 times an increase on his initial investment. The conclusion: back in the days, Buffett oversaw the industry as he always does and made a wise decision not to invest in EV markets in the USA. The market in China had much more potential. BYD at the time was a great success, and the industry in China boomed. This boom was well predicted by Berkshire Hathaway, but can such a thing be predicted again? The EV industry remains booming. Sustainability has never been as trending as now and will only grow. Transportation has a big influence on pollution. The benefit that China has with their strong governmental support can now be found in the United States too. All EV manufacturers have great advantages from a concerted policy push towards electrification. The U.S. Senate Finance Committee advanced legislation in May to boost EV tax credits to $12,500 from the current $7,500 level for electric vehicles that are assembled by union workers in the United States. The bill also includes a 30% tax credit for manufacturers to retool or build new facilities to produce advanced energy technologies. The aptly named Clean Energy for America bill plans to phase out this tax credit after 3 years once EVs constitute 50% of the passenger vehicle sales. Apart from that, the infrastructure has been rising and rising. More companies are investing in developing charging stations, making it more convenient for EV drivers to charge their cars. Warren Buffett has been humble on tech and US EV stocks, but the macro environment is changing and potentials are switching. What are your thoughts on CCIV stock and its potential? Michael believes CCIV is the best growth stock on the market right now. Do you agree? And if so, where do you think it will go in the next 5 years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and maybe we feature you in our next video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.